This is part two of a recording from March the 15th, 2025. Greg and I discuss working with the shadow to overcome the fears holding you back. I made a few decisions recently, some of which I've told you about, or maybe all of them or most of them I told you about. But one of the things I've been doing is I've been listening to that guy every day since we talked about him, the guy that I sent you the link that talks about the Bodhisattva's way of life. When you do something that's on the right track, then you do feel high. You do get that inner sense of positivity, which is an inner feeling. It's an inner feeling of good, as opposed to an outer feeling of good, which might be having a massage or something like that, where you feel great having a massage. So I thought I would listen to this guy every day. Now, I didn't listen to him yesterday, I don't think, because I was listening to somebody else talking about the same thing. So basically, I've been listening to that Buddhist philosophy every day, for the last 5 or 6 weeks. And it's pretty well become a habit now, and it's great. I'm learning a lot. I'm getting a lot of insights, right? And so one of the things that I'm understanding, or that I'm getting some insight into now, is there's a couple of fundamental principles in Buddhism that are really quite profound. And it's amazing that, well, maybe it's not amazing because it's been going for 2,500 years and lots of people have had a chance to look at it and analyze it and, talk about it. But apparently most of the stuff came right from the Buddha. So he realized this 2,500 years ago. But the one of the things that they talk about is that all pain comes from self-grasping. They use that expression, self-grasping. Now, of course, this has all been translated from, Sanskrit and Tibetan and everything else. So, the word self-grasping is not the word that springs to mind for me necessarily, but I understand what it means. It basically means to hold on to it, to hold on to the idea, right?
Right.
And so the idea is that there is no self, that yourself is an illusion. And that's a kind of a subset of the idea that basically everything is an illusion, right? So one of the ideas is that nothing has a self to it. Like, for example, look at this tree. I have a tree outside my window here, right? So I look at that and I say, well, that's a tree. And the feeling is that feeling is the same tree that was there yesterday. But of course, if I think about it, I realize it's not. And it's different from yesterday. And if I think about the history of that tree, now that tree might be, I don't know, 30 years old or 40 years old, as far as I know. But obviously it started from a little thing, a little seed, right? The seed went in the ground, it sprouted, and at one point it was like an inch high. And so what is the tree actually? But it's a process. You can call it life. It's a good example of life, I suppose. So what's it made of? Well, it's made of the water and the soil. And of course, it was transformed. Those little chemicals and things in the soil, they get transformed into what becomes the wood, the bark, the branches, the leaves, the fruit of the tree. So it started from almost nothing, but there was this little spark there, a little seed. And then the seed sort of brought all those little chemicals, all those atoms, if you want to think in terms of atoms. It brought all those atoms of water and, phosphorus and potassium and carbon and whatever else is in the soil. It brought them together in a certain way that made this tree. And if you come back here, 50 years from now, that tree will be gone. It will have died and have eventually turned back into soil, right? So what that tree is, in a very real sense, is something that exists kind of as a snapshot in time, very similar to a wave. You can go down to the beach here and you can look at a wave and you say, oh, there's a wave. Well, what's the wave? Well, the wave is a combination of energy from the wind and the molecules of water in the ocean. And it's only there for a second, right? Well, the tree is exactly the same thing, but the tree, it takes 50 years or 100 years to appear and then disappear. Whereas the wave, it might appear and disappear in a couple of seconds. But the process is the same, right? And of course, that's the same process that creates the earth and the sun and the moon and everything else. I mean, everything is like that, and including the self. This is what they say, right?
Yes.
So the self doesn't exist the same as that tree doesn't really exist. It's a product of a certain set of circumstances that come together and at a certain time, and it appears and then it disappears. But in the life of the universe, which is 14 billion years or something now, the tree is it's there for it's just a spark.
It's a blip.
It's just a blip. The same as that wave is the blip, right? So that's what they're saying that your self is too. That you think you have a self. You say, this is me. I'm Anthony. You're Greg. You have a certain personality, but if you think of it in that way, then you realize, well, yourself appeared from something, just a set of circumstances, and it literally changes. I mean, you're the same as your body changes. Yourself kind of changes too, except that you don't think of it that way. You think you have a self, like I think of Anthony, and Anthony has a certain kind of personality, a certain set of abilities or inabilities or qualities that exists for a certain length of time, and I believe it's me. And the normal sort of way of thinking about it is, I've always been me, right? Like if I think of myself at 10 years old, I think of myself as being me, saying it's me. But of course, I'm quite different now than I was at 10 years old, not just physically, but emotionally and intellectually and every other way, right? So according to the Buddha, then all your problems come from believing that your self is a real thing, and it's not. So what they call self-grasping is this idea of hanging on to the idea of yourself as a real thing, right? Well, that's a kind of a heady concept. I mean, you have to think about that for a while. At least I did, to sort of understand it, right? Like if I take a picture of this tree right now, and I say, okay, that's the tree. This is the tree in my yard. But if I send you the picture and you come back and you come up here to visit me next week and you look at the tree, well, the tree might be quite a bit different. Because it's just, like now it's starting to bloom, right? It's getting a few flowers on it and it's starting to bloom. So you might say, hey, wait a second, this is not the same tree as you sent me the picture of. Well, of course you wouldn't say that, because the tree changes. But that's just one illustration, right? So the problem then is, according to the Buddha, all your pain comes from self-grasping, right? And so I was thinking about that this week, and I thought, well, like what? Like what pain? Well, for example, let's say feeling insulted, right? Like if somebody says something to you that makes you feel insulted or feel embarrassed or feel angry, well, why is it that you feel that way? It's because you think the person is attacking yourself. But if yourself is not a real thing, if it's only a concept that is forever changing, then there's no real need to feel hurt. So feeling hurt is pain, right?
Right.
So in other words, if you didn't grasp, in other words, if you didn't hang on to that idea of the self, this is Greg and you've hurt Greg, you've insulted me, you said
Right.
something to me and you hurt me. Well, what part of you was hurt? Well, something to do with your personality, which is your thoughts, your beliefs, your self-image, your self-esteem, all those things which are impermanent, according to Buddha. They're all like the waves. They just come and they go.
Right.
You believe it's real because you took a picture of it and you have a picture of this wave and you say, see, there was a wave there, but the wave is not there anymore, right? So I was thinking about that this week and I thought, all these feelings, certainly the painful ones, feeling insulted, feeling embarrassed, feeling cheated, feeling hurt, feeling like I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
The imposter syndrome that Michael was talking about. They're all based on that same idea, which is basically there is no self. So
Right.
if I can give it up, if I don't hang on to it, then I'm not going to feel embarrassed because it's got nothing to do with me, because I don't exist in a sense, right?
Right.
So I thought that was pretty profound. What follows next is a short story about how losing my temper completely changed the direction of my entire life. All due, in retrospect, to my ego feeling attacked. So this is the kind of stuff, that I'm learning from listening to this guy explain this book, The Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And so I thought, well, what's fear? Fear is kind of the same. Like if somebody asks me to deliver a talk, well, there was a time when I was afraid to do that. As a matter of fact, I actually left school, left college, because I got in a fight with the teacher because the teacher asked me to stand up in class and read something, and I was so afraid to do that because I used to stutter and stammer, and I had very little self-confidence at the time, and I was really paranoid about people laughing or making fun of me, all of which was in my head, of course.
Uh-huh.
But nevertheless, I got in a fight with the teacher, and then he sent me to the office. I got in a fight with the principal, and I ended up quitting school, which put my life on a completely different track, because my goal at the time, I was studying photography. That's the course I was studying in university, or at least in college. And my goal was to become an editor, like a film editor, a photographer, and get into video editing, and then get into movies and becoming a movie director. That was sort of the path, that I was on, or at least that I thought about. I wasn't actually on the path because I just started. I mean, this argument I had with the teacher probably happened in the first couple of weeks of school, and so I bailed out. So when I think about that, like, that was a huge mistake that I made in my life that completely changed my prospects. I mean, if I had continued in that course and become a photographer and then learned about editing and video editing and then movies and got into the movies, I might have ended up as a film director or something, making movies these days, which was my goal at the time.
Uh-huh.
And my life would have been completely different. So and where did all that, where did it come from? Where did my life get that impact that I call fear of being embarrassed in front of the teacher, fear of being embarrassed in front of the class? It was just a thought that was based on, according to Buddhism, nothing. you know? It was based on what they call ignorance, which basically means misunderstanding, right?
Hmm.
If I hadn't been afraid, I mean, if I was asked to stand up in class today, if I was taking a class today and somebody said, "Hey, Anthony, would you stand up and read, paragraph 3 on page 5?" I'd say, "Sure, no problem." But at the time, it was a huge threat to my ego, to myself, right? So that's what the Buddha talks about. I mean, at least this is how I interpret it.
Uh-huh.
This is what it means to me. Is that like this idea of kind of grasping at the self and then fearing that you're going to be hurt or embarrassed or whatever, trying to avoid that pain, embarrassment. That's a fear.
Right.
That's a fear. And it had a huge impact on my life because I bailed on my college course and then I ended up leaving home. I was living at my parents' place at the time, and I left and started traveling around, and became quite depressed for quite a few years after that, partly as a result of that event, or maybe it was just a part of the whole process of me, being depressed, losing my path, right, losing my
Right.
direction, my sense of direction, my sense of self, and so when he talks about self-grasping as the cause of all your pain, it's like, oh, I guess he's right. It's certainly, as I just described it, what it means to me. So I'm finding this really profound, right?
Yeah.
And so partly because of that I mean, what's happening to me at the moment is that I'm making a big shift in my life. And I started this nonprofit that I mentioned, and I've decided that the the work that I'm going to do is, I suppose the best word for it would be spiritual. But to me,
Uh-huh.
spiritual means mental.
Right.
When I think of spirit, I mean, to me, it's,
Yeah.
philosophy and spiritual. So not necessarily religious, right?
Right.
So the idea of starting this new Life Track Society and that sort of thing, this nonprofit society, to me, that's my new thing now, and it all seems to come together really, in my mind, it's coming together really well, and so I'm very excited about it. I'm all pumped about it, and I was
I
listening.
don't blame you. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how my books and all my writing and everything, in a sense, all everything I've done is all a big part of that. I probably should have. I hate to use the word should, but I mean, if I had done this 25 or 30 years ago, my life would have been completely different today. But then again, I wasn't the same person 25 or
Right.
30 years ago that I am now. It took me all this time to say, hey, I should start this nonprofit and work through that. So it's a well, it's not a new idea, but it's a new idea that fits with me. The last time I thought about it, it didn't make sense to me, right?
Right.
The same as I mentioned when I first heard the idea of making a list of past successes. It didn't make any sense to me either. Now I think it's one of the most profound things I could encourage somebody to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think of you and I think of I know I was reading the philosophers, Plato and different people and things like that. I mean, in many ways they're kind of mentalists, right? They're figuring out the world from a mental perspective, how people thinks about things, how that changes society and the world and individual lives as well. And they make a decision how to live their life, live their life and to live through it, through the process. They're making decisions that are probably the most profound decisions you will make, is how you want to live and what you want to participate in, what world you want to participate in. Are you a Jedi or are you a, or you're not? You're walking through the world like the Buddhists walk through the world, kind of like Jedis or, samurai, these different Asian icons, I guess you would call them, but I mean, I think that you're doing your bliss. I think this is what you enjoy doing. And I don't think you saw yourself this way probably 20 years ago. You said, well, I'm a guy about, you know, training or, something like that, or, guy that was going to invent something or get rich or, I don't know what the perceptions were that we each had of ourselves in the earlier us. But as you go along, you say, hey, I enjoy this. I enjoy, being self-aware and, changing the trajectory. I can
Yeah.
go create a business in a day. I mean,
Well, in a sense, I've always been this way,
mhm.
but I kept it hidden. I sent a little link yesterday, I think, to
The team.
to the group there, the Mental
Uh-huh.
Magic group, and it was a quote by Carl Jung.
Uh-huh.
They're talking about the shadow, and you've probably heard that term before because it's one of his concepts, I think, that he talks about. But what it says is,
Let me look there. I'm looking while you're talking. Go ahead.
and I'll just play. We can listen to it.
Jung spoke of facing our shadows, those parts of ourselves that we prefer to ignore. Maybe it's a deep fear, an insecurity, or even a repressed desire you won't admit. We all have shadows, and most people hide them because they don't want to deal with the pain or discomfort they bring. However, here's the truth. Those shadows don't disappear just because you ignore them. In fact, the more you repress them, the more power they have over you. Shadows manifest in subtle yet impactful ways, in relationships that drain you, in decisions made out of fear rather than confidence, or even in those moments when life feels like it's slipping through your fingers. But it's not the universe conspiring against you.
Yeah. So basically, it's the parts of ourselves that we keep hidden for whatever reason, right?
Okay.
And so for me, like reading this Buddhist literature has been a big part of something that I enjoy doing literally for decades. I started reading about it in the 60s, probably,
Uh-huh.
and it's always been sort of a touchstone for me. But I never mentioned it to people because I didn't want people to think, you're into religion or something.
Right.
So basically, I never talked about it. But if you go through my book, most of the ideas, or at least a lot of the ideas that I talk about in there, there are things I read in some of these Buddhist texts, some of these
Yeah.
Buddhist works. And so, but I was hiding it. So in a sense, it was my shadow, right?
Right.
I didn't want people to think, oh, you're flaky.
That's a good idea.
So I just never mentioned
Concept.
it, right? But it's always sort of been there for me as a part of as sort of a touchstone. Ever since I was a kid, literally, I mean, I remember when I first discovered Buddhism just as a concept. I was probably 8 or 10 years old, and I always felt, the funny thing is, whenever I read anything about it, I always felt like I was putting on an old sweater. It just felt so comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
For more information about this online community, to get your own copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based, either the ebook, the paperback, or the audiobook, go to mindtimeandpower.com, where you can also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook.